Chapter 2 Review. A rabbit population grew in the following pattern. So, if you remember, Chapter 2 is all about inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning and patterns. While the rabbits live and the pattern continues, how many rabbits will be in the 8th generation? So, this is the first generation, that's the second generation, and so on. So, sometimes if people prefer to write this as like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what we have so far. So we have to look at what the pattern is going on. First, I would like to see if I'm adding by the same thing each time. Here I'm adding 1, here I'm adding 2, here I'm adding 3, here I'm adding 5. So that made that pattern not work because I didn't add 4 for this one. Then I can actually see if I'm multiplying by the same thing. Well, there's not an easy number here or here. Probably not multiplying. Then if I look at this, sometimes using the numbers from the previous, so 2 plus 3 equals 5. 3 plus 5 equals 8. 5 plus 8 equals 13. So it's using the two previous numbers, 6, 7, 8. We need to get to the 8th generation using the two previous numbers. So if I want to get to the 6th number, I do 8 plus 13 would give me 21. 13 plus 21 would give me 34. And 34 plus 21 would give me 55. So it would be C. Now I'm telling you, problems like this are going to be simpler on the final. It will be either adding or subtracting, but you still have to just look at the patterns of the numbers. Mario and George have been published in a weekly newspaper. They have sold copies at various prices, and they are located there on the graph. They have made a business deal with a printing company for 600 copies per week. At what price should they sell 600 copies for? So first I would kind of like draw a line here because it looks like it is in a linear model. Then I look 600 per week. If I go over it, that's roughly right there. So price per copy should be about 50 cents per copy. So it'd be C as in cot. Problem 3. Counterexample. You have to remember what counterexample means. Counterexample means something that makes that false. You're looking for something that makes it false. So it's saying every perfect square number has exactly 3 factors. So we have to look for a number that is a perfect square. So this has to be true, but this part has to be false. So right here, this isn't a perfect square. So this one does not work. Here's a perfect square because the square root of 4 is 2 and it has 3 factors. So that actually makes it true. 8 is not a perfect square. So it's not making this part true. It's not making the conditional statement true. Here, perfect square and has more than 3 factors. So D would make that a counterexample because the first part is true. It is a perfect square, but it has more than 3 factors. Problem 4, Becky has told her parents that if you don't do your homework, then you can't go to the dance. Which statement is logically equivalent to what her parents said? One thing I noticed is that there's 2 don'ts in here. So you could take out the 2 negatives on both statements, and that would be if you do your homework, then you can go to the dance. So let's see if that one's in there. Oh, look at that. It's A. Okay, if you can't do your homework, well, that's not really what we're doing. That's talk to your teacher if you can't do your or if you can't go to the dance. But if you can't do your homework, talk to your teacher. Can't go to the dance, that doesn't make sense because you can't flip-flop them. If you can go to the dance, then you did your homework. Well, not necessarily true. Maybe you're a bad person and you ditched out on you went through the window or something. I don't know. If you do your homework, then you can't go to the dance. Well, this is definitely not true because I already know if you do your homework, then you can go to the dance. So it'd be A. So now we're looking at if the then statements. If a triangle has angles 30 and 60, the triangle has a third angle of 90. If an angle in a triangle is 90, then it's a right triangle. So it's saying XYZ has angles 30 and 60. Now remember, this is like our P to Q, Q to R. So we have that little thing that if it repeats in both the hypothesis and the conclusion, so if it repeats in the hypothesis and conclusion, we can make the conjecture that P to R. So that means that if we know a triangle has angles 30 and 60, then it is a right triangle. So we know if this has angles 30 and 60, then this triangle is a right triangle. So it would be C. We know that that triangle is a right triangle. It's just asking for the facts. So not actually asking you to write out the sentence. And last but not least, find the measure of angle 1. So this is kind of like the same thing as a different from chapter 1 maybe. If we look for our vertical angles, here these two have to be the same. This has to be the same as this. So if I'm looking at this whole thing should be 119. And if this section is 64, I can subtract that off and get 55 degrees. And there you go, chapter 2 done. Have a great grand one.